Twitter was forced by the Indian government to put a government agent on the payroll. I think agent means spy. How explosive is that? And then how many other countries?
That to me is the most important thing that is not getting nearly enough coverage. It's like you had a government come to a company that's based in America, and it's not the United States government that did it, and basically said, we need you to place an agent of our intelligence services inside of your company. And it seems like they were like, okay, where do you want them to sit?
Now, Sachs, if that's true, I wonder if they would be required to tell the CIA and our government that their arm's being twisted. Like, this seems unprecedented to me.
I don't
and
know.
if they didn't,
Well,
I mean, if true, again, this is all alleged. So, but if true, Sachs, what?
I think the bigger, but Jason, you should also ask the next one, which is if they did it to Twitter, which is kind of small, what about the big honeypots of users?
Apple,
Google, Facebook,
wow.
TikTok, Snap. And what about countries outside of just India? What about
Saudi Arabia?
The United States? No, I mean, what about the United States?
Well, yeah, we have access to the stuff, through the courts.
There's supposed to be a process.
Warrants.
There's supposed
we
to
have
be
warrants.
The process is you go to court and you get a warrant. Not that it's a high bar, but a prosecutor has to go show probable cause and get a search warrant, present it to the company, and then they turn over the data. This, you're right. It's explosive in the sense that what they're saying is that these government agents, this is what Zacko says according to Time magazine, the purported agents had direct, unsupervised access to internal information.
Which I think means DMs, when the accounts are created, who owned which account, the IP addresses. That's what I'm guessing they had access to, which is you do not want to trust anything. Don't put anything in your DMs, folks.
I'm guessing what it doesn't mean is the Twitter menu in the cafeteria.
Yeah, no. Yeah, not that anybody's been to that cafeteria in 3 years anyway. I mean, there's literally $47 olive steak.
They had direct, unsupervised access to the salad bar.
I think you can basically. I think you have to make an assumption that if governments are doing this to one company, they're doing it to all companies.
Yeah, but you would think,
right?
That Google honestly, would put up a fight, or Apple would put up a fight. But who knows?
Really? You think they put up a fight when they went into China?
The opposite. Don't you think they do the opposite?
Well, actually, what they did was there's actually an even sneakier way to do it. What Apple did when they went there is they said, we're not providing cloud services in China, but all the cloud services are provided by this third-party company. So then they could have plausible deniability.
That's not what this is about.
I'm just giving an example of how this is the trick. I understand,
but I'm asking you a question. Do you think that foreign governments have put pressure on the largest American tech companies to place agents, and do you think they exist in there?
They've definitely put, so the first part, they've definitely put pressure. We see that, obviously. Then the question is, would Apple or Google do this and not inform the government or not put up a fight? I don't know.
Well, I think it's fair to say that the Senate Intelligence Committee is going to haul Twitter and have like a closed door meeting. And then the question is, will they haul everybody else in? And I think what is an important question is this a de rigueur kind of business tactic at the highest levels of every company? And we just don't know it and are typically not read into it. And we would never know in the absence of this whistleblower thing.
And my question is, does our government know that our companies are acquiescing to these governments?
Well, that's been a problem for a long time, actually. So there was an op-ed by a Microsoft executive talking about this a number of months back, where the argument was, well, the government has to go get a search warrant to get your data from these companies, but these companies don't put up a fight. Like they don't challenge the warrant at all. And why? Because they don't have an interest. They have an interest in being cooperative, right? The article is basically saying that if you're the subject of a search warrant, meaning they're going to Google to get information about Jason, the government should have a duty to inform Jason so that your lawyers can go challenge it. And that was the legal change that needed to be made. We had this conversation, I think, last year. That is a change that should be made, because in the old days, when the government would present you with a search warrant, they'd have to go to you because all of your documents were in your possession. They would be at your office, they'd be at your house. So they would come knocking on your door, give you the search warrant. You could give it to your lawyer, they could challenge it. That doesn't happen anymore. Now the government just goes and gives a search warrant to a big tech company because your data is in the cloud, but their argument is you don't own that data, the big tech company does. The big tech company has no incentive to fight the government, and they just get access to all of your data, and you don't even know that you're being investigated.
It's not an argument. You agree to that when you sign their terms of service.
Yeah. The current situation is bad enough that essentially you have very little protection and rights over your data. But what's happening here, the allegation is even worse, which is that government operatives are working with the company in a way that provides them access without them even getting a search warrant.
Yeah, they can just spy on their ex-girlfriend, their brother-in-law, whoever. They can just spy on a celebrity, do whatever they want.
I'd always assumed that this was happening covertly, meaning like, look, if you're a tech company and you have a very bright, PhD on a visa, and you hire that person to work in computer vision, I'm just making this up. How do you really know that that person is not an agent of another foreign country? And obviously the overwhelming majority are not. But once you have hundreds or thousands of people, that you brought into your company, all it takes is one person. For example, we just saw, I think in Apple, there were 2 people that were just recently arrested for stealing all of Apple's autonomous auto data and documents and design schematics and all of that stuff. And one of the guys was arrested right before he was trying to fly back to China. And so somehow they figured it out. They were able to get him. He was not a US citizen, but then another guy that did it was a US citizen, but both were of Chinese origin. It just goes to show you that the covert nature of industrial espionage is probably at an all-time high, right? And I think that's a risk that every company has to manage and do the best that they can. But this is different. This is an overt risk. This is just an overture and saying, open the door, give us a badge, we're coming in. And this is why I think you have to deal with this case very delicately and in a different way.
Yeah. And for people who don't know, Google does what's called the transparency report. Twitter also has one. So they do try to put out by category, search warrants, subpoenas, et cetera, exactly how many warrants they're getting. And the tech companies are at least trying to be transparent about it to the extent they can. But this is going to lead to a lot of people moving off of the cloud, I predict. We're seeing, and in fact, Apple is now storing your data and a lot of your privacy information locally on your phone. And if it's encrypted, they can't hand it over, as we saw with the terrorist shooting in San Bernardino, where they couldn't unlock the phone and they went to the Israeli spy company to do it. So, I think the companies here, at least in the United States, want to defend their users, but this could be make people rethink the cloud. And I've seen a couple of pitches from startups.
I think you're confusing issues. Of course, they're going to try to defend their users in the United States, but what if you let somebody into a different country and that it's not as if those servers are not accessible.
I'm not confusing the issue. I'm just talking about the United States here for a minute. I do think you're going to see people buy mini servers to put or rent their own cloud services that are encrypted and impossible to unlock. And so look for that trend to come, or more companies to encrypt it and say, we don't have the keys, Chamath. So
isn't it crazy that we've spent the last 20 years pushing the cloud, and the thing that may actually unwind the cloud is just the utter lack of privacy that we all have now? We've just created these massive honeypots where, any state or non-state actor can essentially just have an incredibly detailed understanding of who you are.
Yep.
And why? Because we weren't willing to pay $5 a month for storage. Everything needed to be free.
Isn't this part of the philosophy behind decentralized services? That a key
crypto,
part is distribute. Yeah, I mean, I don't like using that term, but just decentralized services where the data doesn't sit on some centralized enterprise-controlled servers, but the data is distributed either on a chain or in your phone or in some way. Your identity, your information, your content isn't centrally controlled, and that fundamental principle may actually come to kind of bear over the next couple of years and decades. That that model is more appropriate for us, for me, and therefore these services that are built that way are going to win in the market. The challenge is ultimately, how do you finance those? Because those services, right? I mean, they don't have as much of an economic incentive.
You have to pay for them. If you're willing to pay $5 or $10 a month for your privacy.
Consumers are doing it, Freeberg. I use the Brave browser and VPNs, and these are becoming a major category. You hear it on podcast advertising all the time. DuckDuckGo Brave.
VPNs are like VPNs aren't just for hackers anymore. They're like real privacy.
You're bringing up something that I think that's really important, which is that, over the last 20 years, for all of us, we've been building these products on the internet. We've actually done a little bit of a disservice because we've basically created these expectations of consumer surplus. And we've never given people true sets of trade-offs. We've always said, oh, you'll get more and it's essentially free because we'll back into an advertising model that supports us being able to give you more and more for free. But it turns out that it has some real consequences. And I do think that not enough of us actually understand why privacy is important. But when you start to hear these examples, and it'll be important to see what the true details of this Twitter situation are, I think that the pendulum starts to swing in the other direction where we say, okay, you know what? I'll eat out at Chipotle one night a week less. And instead, I'm going to reallocate that money to making sure that I have, some amount of privacy.
You can do it for $25 a month, $200 or $300 a year, which is a big number for, maybe the average Joe, but it's being packaged and bundled right now. So you're seeing the VPNs, the anonymous search engines, the browsers all starting to bundle. They're bundling a suite of services. And so I think this is upon us now, and consumers get it and they want to protect their privacy. And Apple has said this is going to be our reason for you to choose our cloud, is that we're going to put the local settings, we're going to put your data on your phone, encrypt it. We don't have access to it. Use Apple for this reason. Of course, they're also building a multi-billion-dollar ad business at the same time in Apple News and their App Store. So there's that. I guess we should move on here. We'll see what happens with this.